Master General Kireniev. Adventure level not available. Half-breed drow. Balushenian. The enemy has done nothing more than lob the occasional fireball at us, sir, General Smar informed me. They have encamped in the wooded area to the southwest, though, which hinders our visibility. So we don't know what they're planning, or even the full disposition of their forces, I grumbled. Yes, sir, I do have some good news, though. Out with it. You were right about that caravan, and we were able to successfully ambush it, he said, with a hint of a smug smile. Our forces returned today and reported that we managed to capture 18 slaves, and even secured the equipment the orcs were escorting. Excellent. Put the equipment to use and put the slaves with the others. Dismissed. I absent-mindedly waved him toward the door. He bowed and left as I returned my attention to the map. While I was glad that I had successfully predicted the enemy caravan's movements, their lack of action against us here has me concerned. I expected at least one heavy assault before they laid siege, yet it has been a week since our scouts confirmed their presence, and they haven't tried anything serious yet. Are they waiting for reinforcements? That would be foolish. A bird sent by my own reinforcements informed me that they had made contact with a small enemy host and weren't able to completely eliminate it, which means that the enemy knows about my archers. Even with all of the forces of the entire unified chiefdoms, they would have difficulty taking this position, and once the archers arrive, I can go on the offensive. Even foreign aid won't arrive before my archers do, so what are they planning? Have they decided against an assault altogether? Our defenses were designed to look ramshackle, but a discerning eye would be able to tell how solid they really are. They would know that they require better equipment to launch a successful assault, but if my ambushes return today, the ambush had to have happened at least 2 weeks ago. It's unlikely that they're still waiting on their caravan. So what are they waiting for? I stared at the map, trying to glean a clue as to what the enemy is up to. No matter how hard I stared, though, nothing came to mind. I scoffed and turned to my bed. I had just fed, so I wasn't feeling particularly tired, but it's important to remain on a schedule when one can. I removed my boots and armor, then slid under my covers. As I lay there, I couldn't help but feel like the orcs were up to something, and I was missing a key piece of information. I tossed and turned, my mind fighting over whether to think or to sleep. After what seemed like hours, I finally grew tired and fell into slumber. Well, you tried. A hauntingly familiar voice forced its way into my mind. It was a valiant attempt to subvert the will of the divine, if nothing else. My eyes snapped open, and caught a glimpse of the dawn's early light shining through my curtain, before my ears had a chance to register what had awakened me. Once they caught up, I heard screams, crashes, and the clanging of metal striking metal. The sounds of a battle taking place nearby. I leapt from the bed and quickly donned my armor, nearly forgetting my boots in the process. Once I was dressed, I grabbed my sword and flung open the door, and promptly froze in shock. There were orcs within my barricades, but I had already realized that was the case. There was a hole in my barricade, which had allowed the orcs access to my camp. The creation of this hole had to have been extremely violent, judging by the distance in which the logs had been thrown. The reason for my shock, though, was because my mind was trying to figure out how this happened, while my eyes were simultaneously providing the explanation. Orcs and drow were fighting tooth and claw, while mages rode by them on horses, flinging the occasional spell to horrid effect. My soldiers had been taken by surprise, and hadn't yet recovered or formed up. In the middle of all of this was a great and terrible beast. Its red and yellow hide was covered in arrows, and its massive fang-filled mouth was ripping my soldiers apart like they were made of paper. A Nahalim, and it was fighting alongside the orcs. How? Where did they get it? Did they tame it? How? Once the Nahalim finished decimating a group of my soldiers, it rose up to its full height, standing at least twice as high as the tallest orcs. Then the beast roared, a deafening and blood-curdling sound even from my distance. His bellow made me wince, and this finally struck me from my stupor. I began to run toward the battle, determined to rally my men and push these bastards back. We would figure out what to do about the Nahalim once we killed a few orcs. "Form up!" I shouted, trying to be heard over the clamor of battle. I raised my sword and shouted again. A few of my soldiers heard me and began to form their lines. A mounted mage rode past them, narrowly avoiding a swipe from a sword. An arrow narrowly missed his head, but that didn't stop him from locking eyes with me. I knew for certain what his target was. I began to ready my blade to try to cut him down, but his staff was already pointed at me. The spell that slipped his lips formed at the tip of the staff, and rushed toward me at blinding speed. Just before it hit me, I realized that this was Wind Spear. I sighed at the triviality of the magic being used, and then the spell hit me. I flew backward and felt a crunch as I was forced through the wall behind me, then another as I continued through the next wall. I slammed into the ground alongside a load of rubble and tried to get up, but flopped back to the ground. My eyes weren't able to focus, and I could no longer breathe properly. I felt my chest and checked my hand, barely registering that the blood covering it was my own. Then the abyss took me.
"We do not have a lot of time,"
the familiar voice once again rasped in my mind.
"You remember our agreement?"
I tried to speak, but no air left my mouth. I vaguely recalled our previous conversation and nodded.
"Good. You are smart enough to know that there is nothing further you can do, and the orcs will take your camp. Once they do, it will not take them long to figure out that you are the commander, and that you are also a half-breed vampire. This will result in a rather unfortunate demise for you."
"Then what do you want me to do?" I asked.
"Flee to the west."
"Not home?"
"No. After you flee, the orcs will find your sister, and she will tell them all about you. Once the orcs learn of your heritage, they will gleefully inform King Lothin. Your home and family will be destroyed before the end of this week, despite your contingencies. If you are with them, you will also perish."
A slew of emotions played from my mind. At first I doubted this being's words, but quickly realized those doubts were likely wishful thinking. Even if the orcs didn't manage to capture Esmira alive, there were the slaves that had been converted. With some clever magic, the will that Allogas imbued into them would dissolve, leaving them to their own devices. It would be foolish to believe that they would keep my secrets. The contingencies that I put in place to prevent Lothin from targeting my family in my absence would also fail once my vampirism became public knowledge. No one would be stupid enough to be caught helping a vampire. More than my trusted servants will die. My grief nearly overwhelmed me. Everything that I had built, everything that I had loved, gone. And there's nothing I can do.
"You will flee, then," the voice rasped. "You must go west. You will be pursued, but if you keep fleeing to the west, they will eventually give up. You mustn't stop until you're certain they aren't following you."
"Where am I going? What awaits me?"
"I would like to tell you, but..."
I awoke, gasping for air. I instinctively grabbed my chest, feeling a hole in my armor and the cloth beneath it. The bare skin that I felt assured me that the wound had healed. I stood and looked for my sword, but it was nowhere to be found. Swearing under my breath, I looked to the sky to get my bearings. The sun was still rising, so my destination was in the opposite direction. I paused for a moment, gazing at the hole in the wall I had left. Esmira was in there, and I couldn't help but think about killing her. While it would better my mood to feel what meager life she has left leave her body, it would cost me precious time. I decided against it, and began to run. If I'm lucky, King Lothin will find a way to kill her for me. Before I could get far, a Hanas stopped in front of me. Atop the Hanas was an orc spellcaster with a very familiar face. He looked at me with surprise, not expecting me to be standing. His shock caused a moment of hesitation that, when combined with his proximity to me, spelled his doom. Before he could raise his staff, I leapt, landing behind him on the Hanas. I grabbed his skull and pulled his head to the side hard enough to hear a crack, and tore into his throat with my fangs. He began to seize as a sweet, coppery taste filled my mouth. I gulped it down greedily, but I couldn't have my fill. I had to get moving. I threw him from the saddle and grabbed the reins, urging the Nas to the west. It began to gallop as I heard shouting from behind me. A wind spear flew past my head, taking a small portion of my ear with it. I pressed the Nas faster and lowered myself to avoid more close calls. The gate had been left open, indicating that a portion of my forces had abandoned their posts and fled. Typical of King Loffin's finest. An explosion hit the gate as I cleared it, sending splinters in all directions. A large one took residence in my left arm, but I quickly removed it. The wound began to heal as I continued into the trees, as fast as the Nas could take me. I continued to dodge both foliage and spells for most of the day, and eventually my Nas tired. It was well trained, though, and it kept going until it finally collapsed. I leapt from his back and continued running, nearly as fast as Nas had. A few minutes later, my pursuers' Nases also tired, and I finally lost them. I kept running until the sun was in front of me, and finally slowed my pace. My heart was pulsing in my ears, and my breath was heavy. I wiped sweat from my brow as I continued to walk toward wherever my goal happened to be. As the sun began to set, I found a small cave. After determining that it was empty, I decided to take a rest. I grabbed some nearby branches from a bush to mask its entrance, then crawled inside. After adjusting the camouflage a little, I made myself as comfortable as possible. Then, I was finally left alone with my thoughts. I've lost everything. My family, my friends, my home, my career, and even my dreams. All I have left is my body and the clothes on my back, which have a conspicuous hole in the chest. I felt my anger build up within me, but it was the cold sort of anger. What do people normally do to cope with loss and grief? Cry? Crying would waste water, though, and I am in a survival situation. No, the best way to cope with my grief is to analyze what went wrong and learn from it. Unfortunately, I have no idea how I can learn from whatever mistake it is that I made. A beast of the wastes had laid low my plans for conquest. Did they capture it in the wastes and bring it here? No, that would have taken them far too long. Could they have already had it tamed and ready to fight? If that's the case, why wasn't it used against my forces to begin with? Could it be that they stumbled upon the Nahalim, managed to capture it without killing it, and one of them knew how to tame it? While it sounded ridiculous, that hypothesis resonated within me. The separate and unlikely coincidences happening all at once, culminating in my defeat. It absolutely reeks of divine interference. The question is, which divine? The one claiming to help me, or one of the other ones? Which of the little bodiless worms had decided to meddle with reality and force my failure?
It was a group effort, actually, and I had no hand in it.
I was so exhausted that I hadn't even realized I'd fallen asleep. I glanced around the abyss, trying to locate the god that had spared my life. Why me? I demanded. Why would I be targeted like this?
They do not see it as you do. To them, you are nothing. They didn't see a half-breed vampire trying to conquer the Night Kingdom and become king. Instead, they saw the vampires about to make a return to power. Obviously, they decided to prevent that from happening.
But why?
Their motives are as unknown to me as they are to you. They likely acted upon a whim, it said with a cruel laugh. Yet, this is precisely what I wanted to demonstrate to you. As a mortal acting on your own volition, you are powerless against the meddling of the beings known as gods. If they care enough about your plans to dislike them, your plans will fail, regardless of the thought or effort you put into them. All it took this time was a whisper to a beast and an orc.
Like you are whispering to me now?
No, I am speaking to you. A whisper is much more subtle. Your hearing suddenly becoming clear enough to make out what someone is saying in a busy marketplace. A sudden craving for a specific dish at a specific restaurant that a certain someone happens to be at. Even something as simple as fatigue can be used to guide you to where we want you to be, as you'll recall.
And recall I did. I remember the first time I heard this being's voice. I'd become so tired so quickly that I thought I'd been poisoned. That was a whisper, then.
As you can infer from our current conversation, we're capable of more direct interference. If you had managed to somehow disrupt their scheme with the Nahalim, one of the other gods may have spoken to the enemy commander and told him about the escape tunnel your orc slaves were digging. If the enemy commander failed, then a lightning storm may have formed and stricken your barricades, causing them to explode.
So why didn't you stop them? I thought you were trying to help me. I knew the answer to this question, and felt foolish for asking it, but my anger and indignation forced it out of me.
I am helping you in such a way that allows us both to achieve our goals, as was agreed. It should be obvious that I have no interest in your petty ambitions, outside of what they can do to achieve my goals. And that's the point. If you listen to me and do as I bid you, I will help you achieve your goal. You will gain power and purpose, and no being will be able to look down on you again. If you do not, I will leave you at the mercy of the other gods to do with as they please. It is very unlikely that they will aid you.
I allowed myself to calm once more and thought about my situation. This being is promising to help me gain power, but not help me do anything except gain power. So what's stopping other gods from eliminating me once our bargain is completed?
They will try, but not because they want you dead. They have another goal in mind, and you will be an obstacle to that goal. However, we can only interfere when we are allowed to. There is a greater being at work here that will make certain the coming contest will be fair. And if you survive, you will be allowed to do as you please, free from the meddling of beings like me.
Then what would you have me do?